Hi, welcome to Snap Judgment. Tonight I'd like to talk to you about CREX, or to give it its full name, Creative Experimental Photography, and explore some of the reasons why many photographic judges find great difficulty in being able to judge this genre of photography. So why do judges find great difficulty in judging creative experimental photography? It's often a mystery, particularly to some photographers, but one of the reasons is photographic judges generally have a lack of experience in this type of photography. Take a look in Victoria. In Victoria, we've got approximately 70 clubs registered with the Victorian Association of Photographic Societies. Of those 70 clubs, you've got maybe half a dozen will only practice CREX on a regular basis. Half a dozen out of the 70. The 48 judges on the VAPS judges list, of those 48 judges, only 8 belonging to just 3 clubs will have experience in creative photography. So the majority of judges don't do this type of photography. And you're probably saying, well, do judges really need to be experienced in all forms of photography? And the answer is no, they don't. But most photography has a lot of commonality. So for instance, you might be a landscape photographer and suddenly giving underwater photography a go. There is a lot of similarities, your use of light, your use of subject and focal range and all this sort of thing. All the technicalities are still there. They'll be different, yes, but they will still be the same. So we have this problem that creative photography is just so different from normal photography that many judges, because they judge subjectively, are prone to allowing their biases to come into play into their judging. And so they do have this problem. Then the other problem is, how do you define CREX? How do we define it? It is very difficult to define. Now, we're all photographers here. We should be able to define photography. But I challenge you, go back to your clubs and start a discussion trying to define photography, and you won't be able to do it. Oh yes, you'll come across this particular definition, that a photograph is a visual image originating from the action of light upon a light-sensitive medium or a device. This is what photography is. But what is photography? This does not talk about the difference between an Ansel Adams and an Edward Steichen, or a Man Ray and a Abbie Lebowitz. It does not talk about the definition between a landscape and a street photo, or a landscape and a photojournalistic photo. Why do some photographers think you should never edit an image, yet others say yes, you can edit images, and that's fine? Some judges like pin sharp images from foreground to background, where other judges are happy with the soft artistic focus and this sort of thing. We're all different, and photography means something individual to each and every one of us, and this is why you will not be able to define what photography is, because it's different to each and every one of us. And so this is a problem. We can't define photography. How do we define even CREX? Now let's have a look at some of the other bits of within CREX. So you look at the definitions and you'll find here's a definition by APS, and I'm looking at the experimental part here. And with the experimental part, it actually comes in 2 parts. The first part is that an experimental photograph displays a novel effect because of an unusual combination of subjects or an unusual viewpoint. Now, most photographic judges, and I've been observing them for quite a number of years, reject an image in this genre if it looks like a normal image. And so I've actually experienced this myself. Here, when I was a B-grade photographer, I put in this image into a CREX competition. I can still remember the judge saying, "Oh, this is a normal image, it's in the wrong genre," and totally rejecting the image. One of the other camera club people piped up and said, "Hang on, no one in the camera club has done this type of photography before. So to us, this is experimental. To us, this is experimental." Profound words. To us, it is experimental. If you've been a wildlife photographer for many years and you suddenly become an underwater photographer, the first 12 months of your underwater photography experience is going to be experimental. So to us, it is experimental. It is an important concept that we need to remember. Here's the second one. Photographs in which images have been modified during or after exposure by using experimental technique. Now, interestingly, I ran a workshop recently on creative photography, and I asked people, could they describe an experimental technique in editing? There was silence. And yet the audience was made up mainly of A-grade photographers. Many of them had been with the camera club in excess of 10 years. Some had even reached their 35-year mark. Many of them had completed university studies. And I asked them, had they heard of the Orton technique or the Adamski technique or the Ventosa effect? And none of them had. So what is an experimental technique? And remember, the Orton effect has been around for in excess of 40 years. When does an experimental technique no longer become experimental? Considering that some editing software even has a slider within their software called the Orton slider. And you can just use this slider to apply this effect to your normal photography. And yet, these people that have been with the club for 35 years and had completed university studies, the first few months of them using an Orton effect will be experimental to them. And this is the big thing, to them. And this is one of the problems with the creative experimental. It becomes very individualistic. As a judge, I will see an image that will be presented by an A-grade photographer. I, as a judge, never see an artist statement, so I don't know the level of experience that this A-grade photographer has, whether it be in genre or with the technique that they're using or that sort of thing. I don't know. And so what do we look at? Most judges are looking for this type of imagery that is highly modified. They've totally ignored the definitions we've just looked at for experimental. They're looking for this type of imagery. So, have judges narrowed the definition without it being placed out there with all photographers? I personally think so. But they've narrowed the focus to a particular type of photography within the creative photography and are totally ignoring the rest of it. Then, of course, we come to creative. Oh, now creative is even worse. What is creative photography? You do a search on the internet and you'll find, if you do a search for a creative photography definition, you're going to have in excess of 73 million hits. It is crazy. You will get definitions such as what the eye doesn't normally see is creative. So that means monochrome, macro, long shutter speed, high shutter speed, zoom photography, and many others are automatically creative? I don't think so, but this is one of the definitions. You also come across other definitions that will state that if you pre-visualize the image before you press the shutter button, then it's creative. I can remember my university lecturers saying to me that you should be pre-visualizing the image every time before you press that shutter button, which means that every one of my images is going to be a creative image. I don't think so, and most judges would reject a normal type photograph. So where do we go with creative? But in your search in creative definitions, you're going to come across this term, altered reality. And in fact, in some national and international competitions, you'll say, a creative photography definition is really altered reality photography. Or you'll say the reverse, altered reality photography is really creative photography. So what is altered reality? Is this image an altered reality image? What do you think? Is it? Considering, here is the original. As you can see, there's a lot of dead trees there, dead branches, and I've removed those dead branches. I've also applied the Orton effect. So is this an altered reality image? Many photographers would say yes, it is. Some would say no. That's up to you to define. Is it altered reality or not? Now, interestingly enough, when you go to this image, the photographers had said, no, the previous one is not an altered reality image, would say, yes, this is. Because here's the original image. Others would say, no, it's not, because you could possibly have photographed that without the creation. So again, how do we define altered reality in creative photography? These last two images, most judges would reject in the creative genre and say it's not a CREX type image. So how do we define them? This is a certain problem. So when we look at this problem of how to define it, now here is a judge's critique of three images. If you look at the first two bullet points, I'm sure someone will mention to you at some point that the use of predetermined filters in software to create a creative image is not usually accepted in competitions by judges. It is seen as the easy way out with not much thought and is really difficult to judge. Or the second one, and I'll skip the first part, but please think about the person who spends weeks in a lot of effort to create a creative image and then gets beaten by someone who has just clicked the filter in software and let the software do the work. Not really fair. Now, I'd like to say that I doctored these up, but sadly, these are real critiques from a real judge. These first two to B grade photographers. The last one, which we'll come back to a bit later on, is to an A grade, but these two to a B grade. This is a really, really good example of how not to judge, how not to give a critique, and it's a really bad judge. But I think there's some points here that are worth unpacking to look at. And the first one is this idea of the easy way out. Where does that come from? I think it comes from the idea that judges don't like people photographing other people's artwork unless you add some value to it. Here in this image, you can see the photographer has merely pointed the camera at this and snapped away the photo, possibly having the camera on full auto. And there's absolutely no thought gone into this image. There is no added value. Yet here in this particular image, thought has gone into it. What are you trying to display? What is the artist who's creating that doing? We've added some value. And you often see this type of photography in people who photograph statues in statue parks or art installations such as the Roan exhibition that's been around Australia. So this, I think, is where this idea that it's the easy way out and therefore it's not well looked on because you're not applying that thought process and looking at how to create a good image. Little or no thought gone into it, little or no skill. So we look at this and we say, well, okay, I can understand where this comes from. But then you look at the idea of the predetermined filters and the easy way out. You'll often hear judges talk about, oh, this is just a Photoshop filter. Just a Photoshop filter. And it's these sort of comments that show the lack of understanding, the lack of experience, and the lack of good judging within this idea. Here is an image. I have applied a single Photoshop filter. I can't even remember what filter I applied to it for this video. But it is a video, it is an image that has this single Photoshop filter on it. And so it would be justified to say that, oh, it's only a Photoshop filter. But the question is, and you saw this before, what has the photographer done before applying the filter? In this case, as you saw, I removed a lot of the dead branches. I applied the Orton effect. And yet those judges who say, oh, it's just a predetermined filter, it's just a Photoshop filter, have taken one aspect of the editing process out and looked at that and ignored the rest of the image, ignored the rest of the photographic experience on how the photographer set it up, what editing have they done before, in fact, what editing have they done after they've done the photography. So this is showing this distinct lack of skill. Then we come to the not really fair part. What happens if you've taken a still life image and you've taken days to set and construct the still life scene? You've taken hours to set up the lights just so, and then you've edited, and someone's, or compared to someone who's walking past a protest in the city and has merely snapped a shot as a photojournalistic exercise, no editing, and they win it because it was an unusual, a very lucky scene that they've caught. Is that fair? No. It's what we call life. So I think comments like not really fair is absolutely not relevant to these to photography in general. But then you come to the other aspect. Here you've got a judge penalising the photographer for using a predetermined filter. Now, one of the hallmarks of a very good judge is consistency. Consistency across all genres. Doesn't mean to say the judge has to be experienced in all genres. For instance, if I was critiquing a painter's work, I don't know much about photography. I don't know much about painting, but I can still critique their work based upon aesthetics. I can talk about colour harmony. I can talk about the various colour theories. I can talk about composition. But I have absolutely no idea when it comes to the brushwork and the skills with the brushwork and the brushwork techniques. I've got no idea. But I can still comment about the image, and knowledgeably so, using what I know about photography. And a good judge should be able to do this without penalising the photographer. Here, this judge is penalising the photographer, and same with the judges who say, oh, this is just a Photoshop filter. They're penalising the photographer for doing something that they accept in other genres. For instance, you can go onto the internet and you can purchase presets for any type of software you want to look at. And I've yet to hear a judge say, oh, this landscape that I'm judging, I'm going to penalise this because the photographer's only used a single button preset. And yet I can go out and many of these presets are free. I can purchase thousands of presets. And they all advertise makes your editing simple, single button presets. So why are judges penalising photographers in one genre that they accept in another genre? It's because they have a lack of knowledge and experience within this particular genre. Here's an image that I've created, and I created some years ago, and it's either won an award or been rejected, and has been rejected on the basis of, oh, it's only a Photoshop filter. But when you look at the back end of this, you can see down the right hand side all the various, not just layers, but there's groups of layers. You'll see many of the groups of layers there. This is anything but a Photoshop filter, and yet they talk about, oh, this is just a Photoshop filter. It shows their lack of knowledge, their lack of understanding, and their lack of experience as a judge. And I will say, many judges that talk about having 20 years experience will say these comments. So they have lack of experience of being a judge. We now come to the third one. Yet another strange image that I cannot fathom. A judge should never say that. Is this the exit for someone trapped in a digital world? Who knows? One thing I do know, while you're trying to work out what is going on, you notice that this image isn't straight either. Perhaps it's not supposed to be straight. Now this again is showing the narrow mindset of some judges. How would this judge go in judging a normal photograph from a photographer such as Gary Winogrand, who was famous for tilting his horizons, as in these two images? You've got other great photographers such as Henry Cartier-Bresson and many others deliberately tilted their horizons for artistic purposes. By stating this about the horizon is a problem, because it shows negativity bias and not a real understanding of the artist's work. So how do we go about judging the CREX genre? Here's a couple of images. This I've also had, this is just a Photoshop filter. It's like the rose one. That is anything but a Photoshop filter. Here is an image that was, you can see the artist here is trying to create an oil-like painting from a photograph. The judge's comment, it needs to be sharper. Here's an image that was put in by a friend of mine. The judge's comment, it's oversaturated. The judge did not even pick up the clue that's in the name of the image. Legoland. It was meant to be oversaturated. It was meant to represent Lego. But the judge commented on the oversaturation. So how do we judge these? We judge these by thinking about, some years ago there was a paper that was put out by a professor from Nankai University, Professor Chin Ho, and he was talking about, in this paper, judging abstract art. And he was saying that yes, structure is important and all that sort of thing, but with abstract art, the primary thing you've got to look at with abstract art is emotion. You can't apply your normal type of techniques to abstract art. And creative photography is very, very much like that. It is up to the artist on how and what they want to do. Do they want to put in a tilted horizon? Do they want to put oversaturated stuff in? This is creative. It's not photography. And therefore, as a judge, we should not be judging and should not be commenting on sharpness, on depth of field, on tilted horizons, on any of the technical aspects that we normally talk about in normal photography. We should be almost talking solely about the aesthetics, the colour harmonies, the gestalt principles that are in place, the composition, and all this. A wealth of topics we can be talking about. We don't need to be talking about sharpness, depth of field, I use a different aperture, and all this. That's rubbish. But many judges, because they don't understand this concept of creative experimental photography, they tend to use this kind of thing. So here's another image. This particular image, the judge said of this particular image, oh, the background is blurred. The background is meant to be blurred. If you are photographing runners, car racing, all that sort of thing, and you're panning, the black background is going to be blurred. And yet this judge commented on the blurred background. I can't see any detail in the background. You're not supposed to be. So these are problems that are going to occur with judges because of their lack of experience, because of their lack of understanding within this genre. So how do we correct that? Now, I've spoken to a number of camera clubs that do this kind of photography, and one of the things they tell me is they put in their introductory letter to the judge that if you're not comfortable judging CREX, let us know and we'll get another judge. Couple of problems with that. First problem, now I used to be a publications manager for a multinational automotive company, and we used to send out information to the dealers and the technicians. And I found many technicians had not read that information. It was a problem trying to get people to read it. And even when people do read technical information, they tend to not read the document fully. They will use what's called the F-search. And this has been shown by cameras that track eye movement. And people use this F-search. That is scanning down the left-hand side of a document with the occasional darts in until they find the information, and then they'll read just that information. So there's no guarantee, even if the judge has read that document, that they've actually read that bit about being comfortable with judging CREX. The second problem is that kind of statement is attacking the judge's ego. So if you're looking at this ego, and judges say this, what do you mean I can't judge this? What do you think? Of course I can judge it. Whether they can or not, they will find that as an insult to their ego and not admit that they can't judge it. So camera clubs cannot do anything about the judges. The only people that can do something about it is the judges themselves. So as a judge, if you're not experienced in being able to create or do this creative photography, have a go. Look at how can you photograph something differently? How can you manipulate the images that we like to see? Manipulate those. You might find that you'll get into an area of photography that you will absolutely love to do, and it will expand your creativity. If not, at the very worst, it will improve your editing skills. Go on, as a judge, give it a go. See how you do. See what you can learn and what you can pass on to other photographers who do this. So it's up to you to look at being able to improve your own editing skills and your own photography skills by doing this type of creative photography, instead of the narrow-minded type of comments that you see from a lot of judges. Now, if you've got anything worth in today's video, please hit the subscribe button and hit the notification button so you don't miss any future videos. Until next time, keep snapping.